What's up, guys? My name is Dylan. This is my 4Runner.
Sounds good.
What's up, guys? For those of you that don't know, this is my 2006 SR5 4Runner with the V8. Although from the front, you might not be able to tell it's a 4Runner. In my opinion, I combined the best of both worlds. You have a V8 4Runner and a 3rd gen Tacoma front end. I bought this 4Runner about 3 years ago with just over 100,000 miles. And today, 3 years later, it has about 165,000 miles. For starters, this 4Runner has a 4x4 long travel race kit that I built myself. It is 4 1/4 over per side, and it works pretty good. It uses a 8-inch coilover, and it's actually a J-arm race kit. If I swing over, you can see it. Instead of there being an A-arm on top, there's one arm that comes from the front. We have a hydro bump bumping off the upper control arm. And yeah, again, I built this kit from scratch and it served me well. It's pretty basic in terms of no bypass or anything, but for what it is, it's done really well. It's gone through a couple iterations over the years, but yeah, it's worked really well. Recently, I installed a Tundra steering rack in this, which has made a huge difference on the steering feel and just the reliability in general running big tires. I'm trying to get a good angle to show you, but yeah, the stock steering rack was on its way out, and I decided to shorten the Tundra rack myself and get it modified. And I know that boot is off. I need to trim the clevis some more so it doesn't catch on the boot. This 4Runner also has a custom bumper or winch mount, or winch plate, whatever you want to call it, that ties into the rest of my engine cage that I will show you guys shortly. But just something basic to hold the winch and cap off the frame rails and get this thing cleaned up in the front. Here's the engine bay. Obviously with the V8, the 4.7 that came in the 4th gen 4Runners, and the rest of my engine cage. Like I mentioned earlier, this ties down into the front bumper, the winch and everything down in there. And yeah, ties in the cab cage. It's just something super basic to build brackets for the Tacoma front end off of, and air filter and everything else, but pretty basic. You can see the bump stops in there land up here, and works pretty well. And I know some of you guys are going to be wondering about the front end conversion. I'll make a whole separate video about that, but for starters, it is the McNeil Racing 2nd gen Tacoma to 3rd gen Tacoma front end swap or front end conversion that I made work for a 4Runner. The panels don't line up, so it takes a bunch of body work, and a lot of the bolt locations don't line up either. So it's a pretty extensive swap, but I think the end result is well worth it. But I will make its own video about that. Currently, I'm running 37-inch BFG KO2s. I really love this tire. It's good in all conditions. I can go drive across the country with it and then go wheel it pretty hard. And it really does well in a lot of situations, which I like. It's very versatile, and for this, it's a perfect combo. Moving on back, these are homemade sliders I made out of 1 3/4 tube, and they're pretty basic with some good design cues. I added a top plate to them with a bunch of dimple dyed holes, and I think it adds a good look and a bunch of protection. Sits up pretty tucked. Preview of the interior. We'll get there in a sec. Moving on to the back, this is where it gets wild. So the back of my 4Runner has a cantilever rear suspension. which if you don't know, the coilover is basically sitting right there horizontally behind or inside the cab. It's sealed off, but it's behind that fender and it sits horizontally. And that is the pivot for it that connects down to the axle. So the rear end, or the rear axle on this car, is a Tundra 10.5. So a newer Tundra axle, which in my opinion is pretty much the ultimate swap for these things. It is a 1-ton sized axle, and it works so good. The wheel speed sensors from my original 4Runner just plugged right into this housing. It's the perfect width to match the front. It's really awesome. I think the only real con is the 5 lug from the Tundras, but I'm currently running adapters to go from 5 to 6 lug, and it works great. I mean, can't complain. They don't make a lot of aftermarket support for them, so you have to get creative, but if you're willing to do that, it's a pretty awesome axle. And looking further in here, you can see the cantilever pivot is tucked up there. Oh, needs to focus. Cantilever pivot's tucked up there, and then the coilover mounts to that. You can see it in there inside the back half, and that is my fuel cell. Oh, that's my fuel cell. We'll dive into in a minute. Here's the back half. Sorry, it's a bit messy. The coilovers mount right there, and they run horizontally on either side, like mentioned earlier. The back half, or the interior, is completely sealed from the exterior. So the back half is kind of like a void with the coilovers and the fuel cell, but it's completely sealed from inside the cab. The cab is 100% sealed. I drive this across the country all the time. So completely sealed. And yeah, it works pretty good. That's the back half. You got a spare tire, full-size spare. It's a 37 full-size spare. I have a PRP spare tire bag, which is super useful for carrying all your gear. You don't want just flying around or loose in the cab, you know. And it's an empty space, like it's an empty void anyway. So it's such a good idea to put some stuff in there. And yeah. That is the back half. And lastly, this is my cab cage. So this is the structure of the chassis. I cut the frame off right about there, right under the rear seats. So there is no OEM frame rail from there on back. It is all the chassis I built. So you saw the back half back there. That's a lot of the chassis. And it's, here, I can even show you. Here are the tubes that run from the back half down to where I chopped the frame. One goes pretty flat and one goes up higher to hit the back half. Yes, and then it morphs into this. This is the cage. It has worked really well. I did it almost a year ago now, and yeah, it's been holding up great. It rips super stiff, and it's been awesome. Behind the rear seats, there's my battery storage and fluid storage. It was wasted space in the back half anyway, so might as well put some stuff back there. Moving up to the front, you can see the cage blend through to the front. Obviously ties right down to the frame. Yeah, pretty simple cage, nothing too crazy. I have some PRP Comp Elite seats. Man, these are the best seats I've ever sat in. And they go well with the interior. To go along with the Tundra rear end, I have an FJ transfer case in this with a twin stick adapter. So I can go into low range 2-wheel drive, which isn't normally an option with the stock FJ transfer case, which is really nice to go around corners and stuff. And other than that, that's about it. I have a 3rd gen Tacoma front diff. Because it came with the stock gearing of the Tundra 10.5, so I straight swapped that in just for the gearing. Also, when I did the back half and cut this thing in half, I moved the fender liner, or I guess that would be the actual fenders because it's not a fender liner, up about 3 or 4 inches to get a bunch more up travel out of the rear end. I like to do the desert pre-running, go fast kind of stuff along with everything, but I like to do that as well. And you really want the up travel for that. So I made sure to cut a bunch into there. You can see right here, I took as much out of the door as I possibly could with it still shutting good and having a functional rear door. And that's about it. That is my 2006 4Runner. Works pretty good. Well, that's the walk around on my 4Runner. I'm glad you guys watched. I hope you enjoyed. This is kind of like the kickoff to my YouTube channel. I don't exactly know where it's going to go from here, but I don't know. I wanted to start bringing you guys along on the journey of building this thing and me learning all the fabrication stuff I know and just bring you guys along.